You focus on your part, right? Spirit says you focus on your part, my guidance. The ego will get very tricky and very subtle now. Mirroring, I can't say that. Mirroring me, Spirit, to the best of its ability. But it cannot mirror me perfectly because it is incapable of mirroring without judgment, without fear, and without guilt. Watch for these characteristics and know that when you see them, you see ego. Do not listen to what you hear, because that which you are hearing is not me, and so it is not your true choice. This is something that we should all know well, but if we don't, it's time to pay attention. As we study A Course in Miracles, NTI, The Way of Mastery, or anything else, Ramana Maharshi, right? As we study anything else, the ego's there with us. It's studying too. And what the ego will do is it will begin to use the spiritual language to trick us into staying in ego. Okay? But if you pay close attention, you will notice. Because the difference between ego and spirit, even as they use the same language, remains the difference between ego and spirit. Ego always uses judgment. Spirit is completely, 100% judgment-free. Never judges. Okay? Ego guides through fear and guilt. Spirit never guides through fear and guilt. It guides through peace. So if you become what I call a student of feelings, feel the message rather than just hearing it with your intellectual mind. If you feel what I call a clean message, and by a clean message I mean it has no judgment, fear, or guilt in it whatsoever, that is something you can trust as spirit. If there is judgment, fear, or guilt in the feeling of the message, regardless of how spiritual the words are, that is ego, you can let that go. And as we go further and further along on the spiritual path, the ego adopts more and more and more spiritual language. You know, like one example that's coming to my mind is when Inner Ramana first started speaking to me. Some of you may remember I got about 30 messages from the Inner Ramana over about a 6-week period, and I posted and shared those messages. One particular friend would comment on the messages, and one of her comments was consistently something like, I don't remember the exact words, but the tone of the message was something like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's Ramana, the one who taught in silence is teaching in words now. Silence is the language of God," and blah, 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 right? It sounds very spiritual. And it's true. Silence is the language of God. The words were right. But there was judgment in that. Right? Judgment. So watch for what you are feeling. The words may be right on, but if the feeling is not right on also, then it's ego. Spiritual ego, we call it. Do not listen, let it go, right? Watch for these characteristics, judgment, fear, and guilt. And know that when you see them or feel them, you also see ego. Do not listen to what you hear, because that which you are hearing is not me, and so it is not your true choice. Now, right now, I happen to think of an example where someone else was judging me, but I assure you I've judged plenty of people myself. It's just that's the example that came into my mind. But because I have been on the judgment side as well, I can tell you that if I was the one, right now, with my current spiritual maturity, right, if I was the one that saw the thought come into my mind, "Oh yeah, sure, that's Ramana, the one of silence teaching with words," right? And I felt that energy, I would see the temptation to make that post and to criticize that person and say, "You're wrong." But I wouldn't do it. That's what he means by do not listen. I wouldn't do it. Because it's not what I want. I don't want to listen to ego. I don't want to listen to judgment. The thought may come into the mind, but that does not mean I have to follow it. All right? I let it go. I see it as wrong. I see it as my error. It's a mistake in my mind. I don't judge myself either, by the way. Don't judge myself for seeing the thought. I just let it go. Okay? Do not listen to what you hear when you recognize it as ego, because that which you are hearing is not me, and so it is not your true choice. It's not what you want. Okay, one more paragraph. You must remain very much in trust with your true desire now. Stick with it in your mind consistently. Repeat it to yourself constantly, even to the point of ridiculousness. Okay, so what Spirit is talking about is remind yourself in your own mind, in whatever words it comes, all I want is the peace of God. Or all I want is to know Spirit's guidance, right? He says, repeat it in your mind constantly, even to the point of ridiculousness. Now, of course, the ridiculousness is the ego's judgment that's going to come in and try and stop you, right? The Spirit knows that the ego is going to try and come in and say, this is getting ridiculous. And so Spirit's saying, okay, so when the ego comes in and says, this is getting ridiculous, keep right on doing it. Right? Keep going. Don't stop. Don't stop. Your mind may be saying, this is ridiculous how often you're saying this to yourself, but keep on going. Right? Keep on trucking. In fact, that's what the next sentence says. Look at this. Ridiculousness is the judgment of the ego. So see that judgment and let it go. Then put your full trust in my advice and continue to focus on true desire, right? All I want is the peace of God. All I want is the peace of God. I only want to listen to Spirit. And just keep reminding yourself. And remember, we talked earlier that if your mind is busy with one thing, it can't be doing another thing. If you're keeping your mind busy by reminding yourself of what you want, the ego doesn't have as much opportunity to get in there.